Alright guys, we did a top 5 list of Christmas horror movies that you guys loved, but now that Christmas is past, how about winter ones? Number 5 on this list is The Last Winter. The Last Winter is a horror movie that was released in 2008 and stars Ron Perlman, James LaGrosse, and Connie Britton. The movie is directed by Larry Fessenden and is centered around the brutal environmental elements that come with winter. The plot description is as follows. Sent to evaluate the environmental impact of oil drilling in the Arctic, James Hoffman clashes with the drilling crew's chief who wants to get the job done. Strange events begin to plague the crew and they are soon cut off from the outside world. Hoffman and the crew feel the force of Mother Nature's wrath, and there's no visible escape. In all honesty, this is one of the few on the list that I haven't seen, but based off of the many reviews, it seems like the perfect winter horror film. Den of Geek writes, "The Last Winter benefits enormously from its massive and utterly flat Icelandic locations and the sense of isolation and emptiness that they provide. The cold is also an ever-present threat, making us aware that nature can be a formidable danger even without manifesting itself as ancient, angry spirits." And personally, I really like this idea for a horror film because rather than making winter just part of the environment, it actually becomes the main obstacle for these characters. And I imagine that it triggers a bunch of other things as well. It's one thing to watch a horror movie about some crazy monster, but it's a whole other thing to watch one about the environment. This is something that could actually happen. Like maybe one day we're in a plane and it has to have a crash landing, and just like that, now we're stuck in the winter wilderness having to fend for ourselves. I'm going to be making an effort to watch this movie very soon, and from what the internet is telling me, I recommend that you do the same. Number 4 on this list is Frozen. Alright, so I know what you're thinking. When did Disney's blockbuster musical turn into a thriller survivor film? And I'm here to tell you that it didn't. Anna and Elsa are still happily building snowmen. The characters in this movie, though, aren't quite as jolly. Directed by Adam Green and released in 2010, the film stars Shawn Ashmore, Emma Bell, and Kevin Zegers, who play 3 friends that get stuck in a very dangerous spot. The premise is super simple. As a winter storm approaches, 3 people become stranded on a chairlift high above the ground after a ski resort closes for the night. For those fellow skiers out there, I know that we've all had this thought before. What if I get stranded on a chairlift? What the heck am I gonna do? This is the question that these 3 friends have to deal with the entire movie. What makes this thing more difficult for them is the fact that it's blistering cold out, and sitting high in the air in a chairlift isn't really keeping them super warm. Also, the fact that on the ground there are some very hungry and very aggressive wolves waiting for a nice tasty meal. Ed Koch, who's a top critic on Rotten Tomatoes, writes, "Frozen is a tour de force, not because of exceptional performances by the actors, but rather the outstanding directing by Adam Green, who also wrote the script. The script gave Green a limited area within which to work, and he carried it off superbly. I will give you a fair warning, this movie is pretty gory, but I feel like that's to be expected from a winter horror movie involving a pack of hungry wolves." Number 3 on this list is Misery. Misery is a very simple horror movie that's so riveting and scary due to the performance by the actors on the screen. The movie's based on a Stephen King book and is arguably one of the few times that the film actually outdid the novel. The description of the movie, according to Chris Sasquay, is a cozy shelter in the woods during the winter sounds like the ideal cottagecore vibe. Except when you're author Paul Sheldon and you're trapped with a superfan. By all appearances, Annie Wilkes is a quirky teddy bear, but there's a reason as to why acting legend Kathy Bates won an Oscar for her performance. Annie is a complicated villain, one who is just as much a danger to herself as she is to others. Don't get in her bad side, or you'll get a lesson on what hobbling means, all the while soothing classical music is being played to ease its pain. It's simple horror movies like this that really pay dividends. 2 people stuck in a cottage together during the winter, and one of them loses their minds. The film is very highly rated, and even though it was made over 30 years ago, it still holds up as being a quality watch. It might not have the same emphasis on winter some of the other entries on this list, but I guarantee if you watch it at your grandma's house or a cottage like the one in the movie, then it's gonna hit really close to home. Number 2 on this list is The Thing. The Thing has had a remake of it before, but in this video we're referring specifically to the 1982 version of The Thing directed by John Carpenter. This movie might actually be my personal favorite horror movie of like all time. The movie stars Kurt Russell, and it's a brilliant example of horror movies from the 80s. The plot description from Google is, in remote Antarctica, a group of American research scientists are disturbed at their base camp by a helicopter shooting at a sled dog. When they take in the dog, it brutally attacks both human beings and canines in the camp, and they discover that the beast can assume the shape of its victims. A resourceful helicopter pilot and the camp doctor lead the camp crew in a desperate, gory battle against the vicious creature before it picks them all off one by one. Winter is in the air in this movie. Being in Antarctica, the researching crew is consistently getting bombarded with the effects of the cold and their snowy environment. Whether it's communication systems breaking down, vehicles freezing, or just generally getting snowed in, winter is definitely an obstacle for our protagonists. The one knock against this movie is that the special effects, they don't really hold up. But I honestly kind of love that. They look like special effects from the 80s, and there's something kind of comforting about that to me. Also, the entire premise of the alien or creature being one of your friends is really fun. It makes you think about your own home and your family and wonder how would you respond if one of them wasn't who they said they were. Basically, this movie is the plot to the video game Among Us, but it just does it so perfectly in my opinion. Definitely recommend giving it a watch if you're looking for a fun winter horror themed movie to help you get through the cold. Number 1 on this list is The Shining. You know, I almost didn't include this one because I feel like everyone watching this video already knows about it, but I just couldn't keep it off the list. The Shining is often regarded as one of the best horror movies of all time. Released in 1980, the horror flick stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and is directed by Stanley Kubrick. The movie is based off of one of Stephen King's most famous novels of the same name. The movie, according to Google, is about how Jack Torrance becomes winter caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel in Colorado, hoping to cure his writer's block. He settles in along with his wife Wendy and his son Danny, who is plagued by psychic premonitions. As Jack's writing goes nowhere and Danny's visions become more disturbing, Jack discovers the hotel's dark secrets and begins to unravel into a homicidal maniac hell-bent on terrorizing his family. What this description fails to inform you of, though, is the environment outside the hotel. It's the dead of winter in Colorado, and that aspect really plays into the whole movie. The characters get snowed in, and that's why simply leaving isn't an option. Similarly to some of the other movies on this list, the feeling of isolation due to the blizzarding outside is shown throughout the whole movie. This really adds to the scare factor because the safe inside that's keeping you warm, well, it really isn't that safe at all. Jack Nicholson is also marvelous in this movie, and the journey his character goes on is brilliant and really chilling to watch. Frankly, this isn't just a winter horror movie that you should watch, but if you're a lover of horror and you haven't seen this one, then it needs to go on your list. Sean T on Rotten Tomatoes puts it beautifully. Chilling, haunting, and unforgettable. The Shining is a horror masterpiece that radiates some of the finest filmmaking of all time. Well, there you have it, guys. That is our list of the top 5 winter horror movies you need to watch. Please comment down below what you thought about this list, and if you're familiar with any other winter-related horror movies that you think deserve to make the list. Thank you so much for watching. I've been your host, Nicholas Playlog, and I'll catch you next time.